Good morning. We are here with Tom Nabbe, and Tom is going to talk to us about the opening day at Disneyland for our History of California class. And Tom has what I think is a rather interesting story because he was there for opening day and managed to turn that experience into what really became a career with Disney and ultimately became a Disney legend. So good morning, Tom.
Oh, good morning, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing well. So what was life like for you in Southern California way back in 1955?
Well, we had just moved to Anaheim. We were living in L.A., and we moved to Anaheim in December of 54. So about seven months before the opening of Disneyland. But had the opportunity, because they were building the Santa Ana Freeway and Manchester Boulevard, and they had just finished the overpass over the freeway for Harbor Boulevard.
Right.
And if you go back, Harbor Boulevard was a 3-lane road at that time frame through orange groves and walnut groves and strawberry fields.
So, all of Anaheim looked completely different than it does today, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And there were actually orange trees in Anaheim.
Right. Yeah, there's a reason why they called it Orange County.
Yeah, back at that time frame. And so what we were able to do was right up to the top of the overpass on Harbor Boulevard and look down into the construction site of Disneyland. So sort of watched it grow out of the orange grove in that area. And it was pretty good for a while. Then they built the berm, and then they planted the berm. So visibility kept getting less and less because of all the vegetation and everything they were putting in. My story goes to when we moved to Anaheim, I wanted a newspaper route. Okay, and Anaheim was considered rural, and you had to be 16 years of age and a driver's license. And I was only 12, so I wasn't going to fit that bill, but I could get a Sunday paper route.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, the Sunday paper was, 25 30 sections. They were big newspapers, maybe a pound and a half.
Bigger than you were.
Oh, yeah, they were pretty good size. So I had a little cart that I had that I could haul on the back of my bicycle. And I had a route of about 20 people that I would deliver to in the neighborhood. And then my manager would give me any leftover papers that he would have, and I'd pedal over to Disneyland. And I tried to get there just about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And that's when the third shift maintenance people were getting off the construction people that were building Disneyland. And so I was able to sell Sunday newspapers to all the people as they were going home at the end of the third shift. Okay, so I met a gentleman by the name of Ray Ahmet. Ahmet, I believe is how it's pronounced. Him and his brother Joe had the concession on Main Street called Castle News. And they had the wheelchair rentals and strollers, and had little printing press in the area where they could put your name in a wanted poster or in the headlines of the newspaper. And they were going to publish a newspaper called the Disneyland News. And Joe sort of asked me if I wanted to be a newspaper boy for him. And I told him, oh, absolutely. He says, well, after Disneyland opens up, every morning I'm going to be out by the gate. And you come get newspapers from me, and if you sell 100 papers outside the gate to the guests, then we'll let you go in the park and continue to sell newspapers. So I got myself a daily newspaper route.
Which is what you wanted.
Yeah, and it was sort of neat. The Disneyland News was a publication, sort of a turn of the century chronicle newspaper, and at Disneyland, only the people that worked in administration, maintenance, and actually run the rides and attraction worked for Disneyland. All the restaurants and all the merchandise locations and everything were run by lessees.
Right. Because Walt didn't have money for those sorts of operations. It was all franchised out.
Oh, yeah. It's sort of what goes around comes around. One of those lessees was ABC. And now the company owns ABC.
Correct.
So
right.
A different cycle. So in turn, the lessees would advertise in this newspaper also, and it was sort of told about the coming events to Disneyland, told a little bit about the history in that. So I had that job offer, and my mother was a little bit of a starlet wannabe. She's that lady that's standing behind the barricades at all the premiere openings up in Hollywood. She used to haul us up there so she could get autographs of all the celebrities. So on July 17th, which was the press opening of Disneyland, and we only lived a 7/10 of a mile over. It only took about 20 to 30 minutes just to walk from the house over to the front gate. And so we were watching a little bit on the TV, and then we walked over to Disneyland, and she had her autograph book in hand and was getting the autographs from the celebrities. And I was sort of stuck around the fence there. There was a little opening by the Harvard gate that I could see the Utopia cars, and I really wanted to drive those Utopia cars. Now, realize I'm 12.
Right.
Okay? So we got to put it in the proper perspective here. And my mother was getting her autographs, and Danny Thomas came out, and she asked him for his autograph, and he very cordially gave that to her. He sort of leaned forward and he says, "Have you been inside?" And she said, "Oh no, we weren't invited." He said, "Well, I got a couple extra tickets. Would you like them?" And her eyes lit up, and absolutely. And so Danny Thomas gave her a couple tickets. So theoretically, we went to the press premiere opening of Disneyland as guests of Danny Thomas.
Which is interesting, because if you go back and watch the opening day broadcast, the very first celebrity that Art Linkletter introduces and says hello to is Danny Thomas.
Oh yeah. So I guess his whole family didn't show up, where they had given him some extra tickets, but
right.
He had them. And so we ended up going into the park. And I remember running all the way over to Tomorrowland to drive the Utopia cars. By the time I got there, they were all broken. None of them working. And I know we did ride the carousel in Fantasyland and walked around the park. I'll tell you, that's probably the trashiest I've ever seen a Disney park in my 50-year career. And I think Walt saw the same thing.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what cleanliness went right up to the top of that list, along with safety, courtesy, and capacity, and to maintain that the park was going to be clean and cleanly. And I think that's one of the things that when Lily asked him why he was going to build an amusement park, that they were sort of a dirty place, and he told her no, it wasn't going to be. So I think that went to the top of his list to make sure that the park was always clean.
Yeah, it's funny because we think of it as such a success, and you watch the opening day broadcast, and it certainly looks that way on television. but, Walt and the company to this day refer to it as quote unquote Black Sunday because, everything that's going on behind the scenes, and you were there to see it, firsthand, it was really anything but a success.
Well, and you go back and look at that, and television at that time frame was live. So, right. So the people that were involved with television were very adept to impromptu situations and to focus in other directions when things weren't quite going well. But yeah, that was a great show, and everybody thought that park was going to collapse in a matter of months, but Walt sure proved it wrong. And in turn, I went on into the park on the 17th on the press opening. On the 18th, my neighbor from across the street and I, Doug Harmon, stood in line, and we bought our ticket to go in the gate. I want to say it was 50 cents for kids, and we went into the park as guests. And on the morning of the 19th, I went to work selling the Disneyland news for Joe and Ray Allen.
Wow. So you were there on the 17th, you were there on the 18th, you went to work on the 19th. You've been a lifer since day one.
Yes, quite a bit. And looking across, there was no college of hospitality back then. Okay, and there weren't people like you that are out teaching the proper way to run a theme park. Every day was a learning curve.
Sure.
For those folks, and you go back and listen to some of the guys to the point where they were down counting the money from the ticket sales to run down and make a deposit at the bank so they could pay the employees. That's how tight things were back
right.
then. Time
frame. Yeah. So you worked that first year selling newspapers on Main Street, and you catch wind that they're going to do something with that piece of land in the middle of Rivers of America, and ultimately they're going to turn it into Tom Sawyer Island. And your name is Tom, and you've grown up with your mom telling you that you're kind of a dead ringer for Tom Sawyer himself, and you start kind of putting a bug in Walt Disney's ear that Walt should cast you to play the Tom Sawyer on Tom Sawyer Island. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm not really sure if Walt had originally intended to have a Tom Sawyer on Tom Sawyer's Island. I think it was going to be sort of like the Snow White Scary Adventure, and you were Snow White. So when you went to the island, you were going to be either Tom or Becky or Huck.
Yeah. The guests get to play the hero and play the part, and
so
everyone just sort of figures it out.
Actually talked them in to having the character of Tom Sawyer. Yeah, somebody had told me, and I want to say it was somebody out of Pendleton Mills had mentioned to me that they were going to build Tom Sawyer's Island, and I wore a straw hat because of my complexion. I've sunburned fairly easy, so I wore a straw hat and gingham shirt and cut off jeans, and so I sort of looked like Tom Sawyer anyway. And Walt was in the park quite frequently. Back then, on Fridays, he would drive down and spend the weekend in the park, and then drive back up to the studio on Sundays. And so I was able to track him down, and I introduced myself, and I told him that I heard he was going to be building Tom Sawyer's Island, and I looked just like Tom Sawyer, and he should hire me. Well, he didn't. But he didn't say no. If he had said no, we wouldn't be here talking. He said he'd think about it. And so that left the door open for me. Now, in retrospect, looking back at it, I think I had some advantages. Walt was a newspaper boy. I was a newspaper boy. Walt was a little tenacious. I was a little tenacious. All those things playing together, and so almost for the next year, anytime I could find Walt, I'd ask him if he was still thinking about hiring me to be Tom Sawyer. I remember one of our conversations, and I can't remember what it was. He said he'd either put a dummy or mannequin on the island that wouldn't be leaving every 15 minutes for a hot dog to go. That type of thing. But I want to say in May, could have been April, but I think it was in May, excuse me, of 1956. I was playing the baseball machine in the penny arcade, spending my hard-earned money from selling newspapers, and Dick Nunes came up and tapped me on the shoulder. I know you know who Dick is.
Oh, sure.
A lot of people don't know who Dick was.
The White Tornado.
Oh, yeah, a little bit. But at that time frame, he was the assistant supervisor of Frontierland Liberty Square. And so he said, Tom, come with me. And those of you that know Dick, if Dick says, come with me, you don't argue. You went with Dick. And we went over to Frontierland, and Walt and Morgan Evans, Bill Evans, the landscaper,
right,
coming off the island on a raft. And we met the raft at the dock, and Walt, and realized that Walt had a lot of child actors and the Mickey Mouse Club and that type thing, and 2 teenage daughters, and so he was pretty comfortable talking to kids, and I think he was just one big kid anyway. But in turn, he'd let you say what you wanted to say, and then didn't talk down to you. He talked right back at you. And he said, Tom, do you still want to be Tom Sawyer? And I told him, absolutely, Mr. Disney. And he said, okay, get a work permit and a Social Security card, and I'll put you to work as Tom Sawyer. So that was real easy, going over to Santa Ana and getting the Social Security card. Okay. Work permit was a little bit more of a challenge. I had to get a form, had to take it to employment. Employment had to fill it out, had to take the form back to the school. They approved it, then they would issue a work permit, and I'd have to take that back to their employment. So I went into the employment office, which was a house on West Street that they didn't tear down. They kept it as an office, and I introduced myself to the lady behind the counter and told her my story, and she asked me to have a seat. And so she went in and told the manager of employment, Chuck Whalen, at that time frame, that she had this kid out here, and telling her that Walt hired me to be Tom Sawyer, and that Dick Nunes knew all about it. And so the side of the story I hear from Dick is that Chuck picked up the phone and called Dick and said, I got this kid over here that said Walt Disney hired him to be Tom Sawyer. Dick, we don't hire kids. And Dick said he took a little bit of a deep breath, told Chuck, he says, let your conscience be your guide, but Walt did hire him. So at that point, all my paperwork got filled out, and I went to work as Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn. What did Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn do? I posed for a lot of pictures. When you really get down to it, Huckleberry Finn was the one with the fire red hair and freckles. Tom was a little more of a sandy colored hair, but I would answer to either Tom Sawyer or Huck Finn, not to Becky Thatcher in the intro. And I think I was in everybody's picture album in the Snyder, entire Southern California and West Coast people's visits to Disney.
Probably hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photo albums.
Yeah, and I did that all through junior high school and high school. You sort of you look at it, and I don't know if you mentioned earlier or not, but I do these interviews, and somebody said one time, "Why don't you write a book?" So I did. And now, in retrospect, looking back at that, that's the American dream. Here's a kid that starts out as a newspaper boy and ends up working 50 years for the same company and retired as the manager of distribution services at Walt Disney World. Go through the opening of Disneyland and go through the opening of Walt Disney World, have the opportunity to be involved in the opening of Disneyland Paris, which just celebrated its 28th birthday.
I saw that.
Yeah, a couple of days ago. So, in turn, I made a major career change in '84, right after Epcot opened, and the company went through a little bit of a downside. I think most people have read Storming the Magic Kingdom know what went on at that time frame. And so I made a transition. I was working in WED for PICO, which is Project Installation Coordination Office. Well, in '84, there weren't going to be any more projects for a while. And anybody involved in overhead, and WED was definitely an overhead, sort of got furloughed. One of those downtimes, just like I look at today at the downtime, and it's going to be a whole different world when the park opens back.
Right.
Hopefully in the next month or so. So in turn, I made a major career change and I worked for 25 years in the rides and attraction side of the business at Disneyland and at Walt Disney World. I went from there into the support side of the business, and I learned how to operate all the warehouses at Walt Disney World. And that's where in 2003, I retired from Walt Disney World as the distribution manager. In 2000, and when I retired, they were very kind to give me a window on Main Street. At Walt Disney World.
Which is the highest honor you can receive.
I thought that at the time frame, I thought that was the Hall of Fame for the Disney company until 2005, and every 5 years I would go back to Disneyland, and it's on my schedule for this year for the 5th anniversary of Disneyland. So we were there for the 50th anniversary, and the alumni club had a dinner dance, and we were there, and a gentleman by the name of Jim Cora, I know you know who Jim is, but basically said, "Well, Tom, I'll see you in September." And I'm going, "Jim, no, I'm not going to be back here in September. Maybe in 5 years from now you'll see me." But he says, "Oh no, you and Sully and I've been inducted as Disney legends." And Cora was one of those guys that he sort of throw up the line, and if he hooked you, he'd really get. And I was sort of watching on how I responded back to but sure enough, when I got back to the room, my sister was house sitting for me, and called her and asked her if there was a letter from the studio, and she absolutely confirmed yes, there was a letter there indicating that we would be inducted as Disney Legends in September of 2005. So I thought that window was the cream de cream, but I got goosebumps right now. But that legend, to be a Disney legend, and especially a living legend,
right,
it's just outstanding.
Very cool.
Yeah, I know we've had the opportunity through the years of being together. I think the one that we did for Give Kids the World with Sully and Billy Hosher and myself was probably one of the best interviews that I've gone through, and a lot of reminiscing and bringing back old memories.
Yeah, we did that in July, and probably one of the best events I've ever had a chance to be a part of. So that was really cool. So two final questions. So you were talking about fishing and hooks and lines. So just real quick, I know that very briefly out on Tom Sawyer Island, you guys tried to do some fishing in the rivers of America. So tell us how that went very briefly.
Well, they had fenced in the area around the fishing docks, and the fishing docks are just opposite the Mark Twain Landing. So if you see pictures back in there, and if you see pictures back at opening, I'm not in those pictures. They invited the kids from the Hannibal, Missouri, Tom Sawyer and Becky Thatcher have a contest every year.
Back from Mark Twain's hometown.
Yeah, and they invited those kids out for that. So those pictures aren't me. That's the kid, because the island opened on the 16th of June, and I didn't go to work until the 18th of June. So they had stocked the rivers with the bluegill, catfish, and sunfish, and I had 50 fishing poles, 25 on each dock, and used worms as a bait. That's one, besides posing for pictures, I would maintain the fishing poles and bait the hooks for people that didn't know how to bait the hooks. And when we originally started, it was a catch and clean program. So if the guests wanted to keep the fish, I had a little area where I could go clean it and put it in a plastic bag for them. That didn't last very long. Maybe a month, if that long, because old dead fish started turning up where you didn't want old dead fish to turn up.
Yeah, I tell this story in my second book, and it's one of my favorite because the idea of walking around an amusement park with a dead fish in a plastic bag is just not a fun idea.
Well, different time, but in turn, we immediately went from catch and clean to catch and release, and I debarbed all the hooks.
Yeah.
So that's how and actually Walt would come over and go fishing.
Sure.
Yeah, and spend some time. He used to come over in the morning, early, and walk the island, that type of thing. I remember we walked the island one time that he was getting ready to do a major rehab. I think it was 57. And when the island came back up, he had asked me, what did the island need, Tom? And I told him an escape tunnel from Fort Wilderness and a treehouse. And sure enough, when it came back up from rehab, we had an escape tunnel from Fort Wilderness, and we had a treehouse. We also had Teeter Totter Rock, Castle Rock, Merry Rock, and I won't take credit for those, okay? But I will take credit for the treehouse and the escape tunnel.
Nice.
That's the only art directing that I can really remember in my life.
Well, and that's a good segue for the last question. So you had an opportunity to meet Walt, to interact with Walt, to have, sounds like, some lengthy conversations with Walt. What was he actually like?
Oh, Walt was always thinking, and like I say, he was very comfortable to talk to, and he was always full of questions. And I remember when we used to walk the island, he used to tell me that his whole thought on the island was the paths were for the adults and the island was for the kids. And he used to scold the security post there once in a while, and you get somebody that wanted to keep everybody on the path. Well, that isn't what Walt's intent was.
And he had designed the island himself.
Yes. Yeah, he was pretty much the total art director on that island, and I think it brought back all the things that him and Roy wanted to do as kids back in growing up in Marceline.
Sure.
So, but he was, my contact with Walt was a 12-year-old child, okay, with a 55-year-old man. Okay, that was a major star in my mind, and made movies and that type of thing. But like I say again, he was very easy to talk to. He used to walk around the park in the morning and talk to all the landscape people and the security people, and he would even talk with the guests. And he didn't look like the guy that was on TV. Okay, he usually had a couple of days worth of growth of beard and had a Panama hat on and his double-breasted blazer and a pair of great pants. But he didn't look like the guy that was on TV. So most people didn't know who this old man was that they were to. But he would talk with the guests and ask them how they were doing and what did they think and what would they like to see and Kelly got inundated when somebody finally recognized him. Got inundated for autographs, and one of our jobs as employees was to approach Walt anytime that he was inundated for autographs and ask him if he wanted to get backstage, and he would say yes or no. And if he would say yes, then you would get him to the nearest backstage gate or entrance or doorway because he wasn't totally that familiar with the
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, he loved talking with people. I remember we had one photo shoot. We're both sitting on the railing on the raft, and he looked over and he says, "Tom, just look at me and smile. I do this all the
time." That's funny. So I said that was the last question, but this is really the last question. So for the students who are taking History of California and they're having to finish the class a little differently than maybe they expected because they're having to go through something that's a little bit unprecedented, maybe a word of encouragement for a kid who, just wanted a paper route and managed to turn that desire into something that I think is pretty phenomenal, and that is kind of an all-star Hall of Fame Disney legend career. What would you say to the students? Again, a word of encouragement, word of inspiration and motivation this afternoon.
Well, first of all, don't give up. You need to do the best job possible. I think that's one of Walt's philosophies was if you do it right and do it with quality, then people will appreciate that and come back. Okay, and you need to handle that in your life and the golden rule applies as far as I'm concerned. Treat people like you would be treated. And learn what you can, learn from your experiences, and then share those learning curves. That's one of the things that I get to do periodically with interviews like this, and then I get involved to go back into some of the training programs that they have, and I have the opportunity to share my history and stories, and I love doing that. And I basically say that to anybody out there, if you have an opportunity to work in a special project, definitely take that opportunity. That is so much of a learning curve going forward. And I've had the opportunity to open many attractions and a couple of parks and use that experience going forward. Your job is to train and develop people to take your job. Okay, if you don't do that, then you aren't ready to move forward. I think one of the prime examples, and Bob Iger, I've just been absolutely impressed with that gentleman. Last 15 years of the company, and if you sort of look at Disney's history, it goes to 20-year cycles. In the 20s, the company was formed. In the 40s, it lived through World War II. World War II got pretty close to some of the crises that we're going through today. Okay,
Sure.
And then in the 60s, Walt passed. And in turn, there was a whole different experience that happened along that line. And then, Epcot came and went, and Michael and Frank, Michael Eisner and Frank Wells came on board. And then they lasted about 20 years. And
Yeah.
in 2005, Michael Iger, Bob Iger came on board, and now it's in that 20-year cycle that he's going to turn over the reins to Bob. But it's one of those. There's nothing that you have to have at Disney other than maybe something to eat. Okay, everything else is an impulse buy, an impulse experience, and I think that's one of the things that we do the best and train people to do it that way. This college of hospitality thing I think is great, and have the opportunity for students to learn, especially from people that are involved in the entertainment business. Through I do this story too for one of the kids who used to work for me that's a professor at South Carolina, and he brings a group of students down, and I give them the Tom Nabbe story. And they seem to enjoy that a lot.
So, all right, Tom. Well, I appreciate it. And like I said, when I very first met you at, I think it was either D23 or one of the Disneyanas back in 2015, your story saved my first book because, the chapter Mastering the Four C's, I had to have a story at the end of that book that wrapped up confidence, curiosity, constancy, and all of those in one fell swoop. And your story does exactly that. So thanks for sharing. Thanks for giving my History of California students a boost, and wishing you the very best there in Orlando. And I know all of our cast members are really struggling today, and hopefully the parks get up and running and the rest of the world gets up and running sooner rather than later. Stay healthy, my friend.
Yeah, well, I remember that day very well, that I was looking through, and actually I was looking at Dave Coning's book, and you were at a table right next to him.
Yeah.
And that's
his daughter goes to CBU now, by the way.
Yeah, and that's where we first met. I had the opportunity to sign one of your books along that line. But I've really enjoyed our association, and I knew you'd do such a great job of introduction to the world of entertainment to your students. So wish you the best, and I hope this plays out well as an intro for you. You have a nice day.
All right. Thank you, Tom.